Now for today, I'd like to introduce to you Hélène Egan, who is a professional coach and facilitator with Life Coaching. Today she'll be presenting Bringing 2012 into Focus through Goal Setting. She has enjoyed training salespeople and their leaders with one-on-one coaching and as a classroom facilitator with small and large groups. Creating environments where people bring their best is Hélène's passion. Hélène is privileged to have worked with clients in a variety of fields, including pharmaceuticals, media, financial services, and manufacturing. And apparently this is a welcome back to Hélène. She's been on Thought Rock before, so we're bringing Hélène back, and I will introduce her now.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Rick. And I guess let's get going. So our title today is Bringing 2012 into Focus through Goal Setting. And another way to look at that is, really, why do I bother setting goals anyway? For some of you, we just go through our day-to-day activities and check off the to-do list. And at the end of a while, sort of sit back and go, what have I accomplished? When we take the time to set goals, then we can really sit back and look at what we've accomplished, how well we've done against our goals. And there's a really something great to be said about that feeling of accomplishment. So why do we bother setting goals? For that, we bother setting goals to push ourselves. We bother setting goals to sometimes justify money that is spent. But the bigger question sometimes seems to be, how do we bother setting goals? How do we do it? So when you think of goal setting, I'm curious about what comes to mind. Sometimes what comes to mind is this, that feeling of, really, do we really have to set goals? How long is this going to take? We do this all the time. We don't necessarily look at them later, and so on. Or do you think of this when you think of goal setting? For many people, goal setting is really what drives them, what motivates them, and what makes people achieve even more than they ever thought. So I invite you to consider goal setting from that perspective, the perspective that they can help you achieve even more than you maybe thought that you could achieve or even wondered about achieving. So let's make goal setting as easy as possible. You need to ask yourself a few questions in order to get started as you get into setting goals. By the way, it's the end of April. It is not too late to set your goals for 2012. So if you haven't spent the time and really given time and energy to this exercise, then I highly encourage you to do it now. Why not? Set your goals now for May and so on, so that you can end the year and get into the middle of the year with some awesome energy. So let's ask ourselves a few questions to get started. Your questions might be, what do you want? So when it comes to your goals, what do you want? When do you want it? What's in it for you to get it? And what are you willing to do about it? Those are the things you need to think about when you think about setting your goals. So when it comes to what do you want, what might come to your mind is money. Maybe you want more money. Maybe you want travel. Maybe it's about time. You want more time, less time. Maybe you want a way out of whatever it is that you're in. So that could be jobs, that could be commitments, volunteer commitments, it could be anything. Maybe it's a way out or towards something. Maybe it's play. Maybe you want more play, and maybe you want to celebrate. So thinking about what you want, even from a visual perspective, can help you create your goal, or at least start to get clearer about your goal. So here's the thing. If you're not really clear about what your goal is just yet, don't give up. Take the time and start to get it clear. Start to create a shape around it. So thinking about what do you want, that really needs to be a personal thing. I also highly recommend that you set a balance of goals. Some business-wise, but also set yourself some personal goals. Balance is always a good thing. You may have heard of the SMART acronym. This is a great way to measure up your goals. Once you've really thought about what you want, when you want it, and so on, check whether or not they fit with the SMART way of assessing them. So is this goal specific? Will I know what it looks like when I've achieved it? Will other people looking in know when I've achieved it? Is it measurable? So thinking about a percentage, thinking about a dollar value, thinking about amount of time, and so on. Is it measurable? Can I know from one moment to the next whether or not I've achieved that goal? Is it even achievable? So stretching is great, but can I achieve it? Because when it's way too out there, of course, we're more likely to give up. Is it a realistic goal? Do I have things that are available to me, or do I have the resources I need in order to achieve this goal? Is it realistic? And then, of course, the other thing is it time specific? How will I know when to expect to achieve this goal?
Hélène, just a quick question for you. I know that oftentimes people may say that someone else, like their boss, is responsible for setting their goals for them. So can you talk about maybe how can you make those goals SMART?
Yeah, great point, right? It would be sometimes we set our own goals, and those, I believe, people tend to connect with them the more input that they've had into creating their own goals. So if your boss is responsible for setting goals for you, then that's just your reality. Here's my challenge to you is if you're in that situation, at least have a conversation so that you can help your boss see that you need buy-in, and so that you can find a way to create buy-in for yourself. So it may be as simple as having input on the time-specific piece of it, or having input on the measurable piece of it. Oftentimes we don't have, we can't have input. You know, we want sales results to increase by X%, and that's, I don't have a choice about that as the employee, but maybe I have a choice about what resources are available to me, or the time specificity. So the more input you can have, but here's the thing, approach it as a conversation, right? That would be my suggestion. How does that sound?
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Great. Here's another thought for yourself. As you, for those of us who have as much input as we can into our goals, so whether it's because we are running our own business, or we are given the task of setting our own goals, or we are thinking about our personal goals as well, I challenge you to look at SMART from a different perspective. So what if SMART means this? It's specific, it's measurable, it's audacious. What a great word, right? It's resonant. It really means something to you. And what if your goal, you think of your goal as being totally cool? So this is just a different perspective from, oh, I have goals, I have to meet my goals, I have to work towards meeting my goals. And listen to the energy from the, wow, I have this goal, and it's really cool, and I'm excited about it, and it means something to me. So if you can do something to change your perspective from, you know, that heavy load kind of goal to audacious, resonant, and totally cool, then I invite you to do that. And it's not just simply, you know, changing your mindset. It might be making an actual tweak to your goal. So here's my challenge to you folks out there today is write these words down somewhere and put it on a Post-it note or somewhere as you think about your goals. Create some audacious, resonant, and totally cool goals. I would love that for everyone. Sometimes people will ask, well, how many goals should I set? What would be, you know, what's the right amount of goals to have? And of course, that depends on you. It depends on the person. It depends how goal-oriented you are. But here's what I offer you is the idea of a balance. So have some goals that kind of scare you a little bit, that make you want to get a little bit jittery and maybe out of your comfort zone. Have some goals that are really safe, that you know you're going to get those and it's going to be nice and easy. Have some that are really fun, keeps you motivated, and have some that are serious and really meaningful from a different perspective. I've talked about professional and personal goals. Of course, the more we can balance everything, then the more all of our goals risk, for lack of a better word, of being achieved. Have some short-term goals, have some long-term goals. So balance is what you're looking for when you're thinking about your goals. You don't need 12, you don't have to have 5, and you know, you can get away with 1 or 2. Whatever works for you, that just keeps pushing you forward.
And Hélène, just another question here. So as we all know life's not a straight line, and things often happen that are out of our control. So any thoughts on I guess, when these things happen, what are your thoughts on it? How do we make those adjustments, and how do we deal with those unexpected situations?
Yeah, you're bringing up a great point. Often obstacles come in the way of goals. Things will pop up, whether it's our energy is being directed to something else. If we are not the one responsible for setting our goals, sometimes those people don't see our goals as important as we do. So when things come up along the way, it might be the best idea maybe to stop, revisit your goals, and just check in with them. Are they still specific, measurable, realistic, and all of that sort of stuff? So do they still meet the SMART criteria? So it's okay to tweak goals along the way. The goals are not meant to stop us. They're meant to get us moving forward. Now, I know that I just said it's okay to tweak goals, and sometimes our bosses won't necessarily let us. But maybe there's a different goal you could tweak. So, and here's the other piece about obstacles is the more we can anticipate them, then we can be prepared for them. So keeping in mind that obstacles will come along the way. Life is not a straight line. I really like that saying, actually. Life is not a straight line, so that may happen. So being as prepared as possible. So I invite each of you right now to think about what do you want. Start to determine what's one thing you're trying to achieve. And as you think about that, test that idea against the SMART system. So here's an example. If my goal is to increase sales by the end of the year, what's SMART about that? Well, increase sales is SMART, right? That's specific to a certain extent. It's realistic. End of the year is time specific and so on. But what could be smarter if I'm very specific about wanting to increase sales and I know that I want to increase them by 7%? Then I will know when I have achieved this goal. So that's what I mean by that. So as you start to think about your goal and what you want to achieve, really get specific about how you want to measure it. Now, what can we use, right? It's great. Thinking about our goals is really a great thing, but we do need to capture it. And the more clearly you've captured your goal, the more likely you are to follow up with it, to get the support you need, and so on. So there's a few things you could do. You could create a simple document. So it might look something like this. 4 columns, what's the goal, what's the date, how do I want to get there, and what are some of the obstacles that might get in my way. So for example, increase my sales by 7% by June 1st of 2012. And how do I want to do that? Well, I know that for me to do that, I need 6 new clients signed on. And how am I going to manage that? Well, I'm in meetings 80% of my time. I will need to learn how to say no to meetings. So see how that can create a beautiful cycle. Fewer meetings, more opportunities to meet with clients, and so on. Another example, launch a product by a certain date. How will I do that? I'll need to create a launch team. I will lead that team. And what are some of the obstacles that might get in the way? Well, maybe the development of the product and so on. So this is a pretty generic and example, but it gives you some idea of one of the tools you can use. Just an easy document. Here's another tool. This is my personal favorite, the mind mapping tool. So I just use a mind mapping tool and I create my goals for the year. I like it because I can really see a visual aspect to it, and it gives me a good idea of how what my goals, how I'm tracking towards my goals. So I'll have a branch for fitness, a branch for coaching, a branch for what I want to sell, and a branch for volunteering and so on, and just slowly add in my thoughts around those goals. So mind mapping tool is a nice, easy tool that you can use to help you with your goals as well. Another tool to use is a mastermind team to support you. So a mastermind team might be a group of people either that you work with or that have some interest in your achieving that goal. Their interest may be because they'll get something out of it. It may be because they'll be extremely proud of you for reaching your goal. It may be because they want to learn from you. Who could be part of your mastermind team to support you as you go through this goal? And, you know, there's a way of just having those people hold you accountable. Recently, I'll share a story. Recently, what I've done is I set a goal for myself. I sent a note to a few people in my life and said, here's a goal I've set for myself. And I'd love for you to check on me every so often and ask me how it's going. Please don't check on me every day, but every so often, ask me how it's going. Boy, has that really helped me stay to my goal. And I will absolutely achieve that goal, just knowing there are people out there who are asking me about it.
Hey, Hélène, I've got a question for you. So if we talk about action items and action items per goal, and I mean, I guess I'm thinking of in terms of best practice because, and not that it's the same for everybody, but I think it's often that people start with good intentions, and then I think maybe they've made their goals either too complex or too many action items to keep following through, and it's almost too cumbersome, especially if they're not wired to be goal setters in the first place. So just some thoughts on how many action items maybe, let's assume it's a getting started and it's kind of a really trying to flex that goal setting muscle and getting it really exercised initially before you kind of really go fast forward. If some thoughts on how to get started with the numbers of action items for your goals to ensure that you can at least have the follow through and get that momentum.
Right. And I'm sure that you guessed that there's no real right answer when it comes to action items. But here's what I will say. There's a lot of people out there, we try to overcomplicate our lives. And so if you can set yourself a goal that has 2, 3, 4 action items, and then you get to check that goal off because you've achieved it, then why not? Go for it. So, I like what you brought up, which is for those of you who are fairly new to goal setting, you may have done it intuitively in the past, but you haven't really sat down and written them out and really thought about it from that SMART perspective. Start with a couple of goals that might be relatively easy to achieve with just a few action items. And I'm going to throw out the challenge, set yourself a bigger goal too that may have a few more action items. And once we get the momentum going, often that's what most of us need, is to just create some momentum. So it's okay to have a goal that only needs a few action items, and you may have some goals that need a lot more action items. If that action item list is starting to get way too long, you likely need to break that goal down. So breaking it down into even more manageable pieces is likely what you need to do. So, it's kind of a wishy-washy answer, but I hope that you're getting some picture about just, making it as achievable for yourself as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Thank you.
You're welcome. So now I'm going to try to be a little bit more quiet and give each of you out there, and so this is, when it's too quiet, don't panic, but it's time for you to think. So I want you to give it a try. Start to think a little bit about what do you want, and I'm going to be quiet for a few seconds at least, and think about what's that one thing that you've been wanting, that you've been thinking about, that's just been niggling at you every so often it comes up. So start to think about that, and you might even want to jot it down. I'm going to be quiet for 20 seconds. And if that was really easy for you, then congratulations. If that was kind of hard to really, create a concrete sentence about what you want, be okay with that, because sometimes these things take time to really come into focus. So if you've already got it, really pay attention. How is it fitting with the SMART assessment? And if it's not in focus yet, give it some time, maybe talk it through with somebody, and keep shifting it and shaping it, and it will eventually create a SMART. But I'll tell you something, once it's a SMART goal, you'll know, and it will feel like, wow, okay, I can go now. So once you're ready to go with the SMART assessment, having checked off each of those 5 pieces, S-M-A-R-T, now you need to capture 2 more things. What are the action items that you need to get you there, that you need to accomplish to get you there? And what's the support you're going to need to achieve this goal? So here's what I mean by that. You may not need any support at all. You may need a budget. You may need to get approval for certain activities. You may need a whole new equipment. What's the support that you'll need to achieve this goal? And it's you're going to have to go out and get that, or find somebody to help you get that. So those are really two things that are also need to be considered. I may even add a third here, and it's what are some of the obstacles that you might come across. Again, thinking about those early on will help you be more able to overcome them. So those are a couple of things to think about. So in conclusion with this piece of it is my hope is that each of you right now have taken the time to create one goal. And if you have, then have a look. Is it specific, measurable? Is it achievable and audacious? Is it realistic and resonant? Is it time-specific and totally cool? So I want you to think about that. And if you're not there yet, be okay with that, but don't let it go. Just you've taken the time today to pay attention to this, so don't drop your goal because it's probably important to you. That is my presentation piece. So what questions or comments do you have?
And then I got another question that's out there. Yep. Is when you go back to there was a slide that talked about what if SMART is specific, measurable, audacious, resonant, and totally cool.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's, to me, again, if we're starting with, if we're talking on the personal side, not necessarily on the professional side in terms of inside a corporation or what some of the folks on the line might be inside of IT departments, but if we just look at this as an exercise on their personal life, mm-hmm. I just wondered if when you look at those 5 items within that slide, how important do you think it is that it should be the last 2, or at least, the last 3, but audacious? To me, it seems like one of the challenges people have, especially when they're setting goals, is they set goals like they would set a task list. And I think, I mean, just maybe, again, if you want to expand on that a little bit further about the importance of having emotion behind your goals, because if human nature is that if it's not really something that they can actually get emotional about and see themselves, in achieving it and actually being kind of an emotional achievement as well, that sometimes that's where goals almost become similar to the rest of life, which is just really a task list. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, just any more thoughts around how to make that resonate more with folks in terms of how important it is if you're just getting started. To me, it's about finding that goal that is really going to personally resonate. And again, this isn't just about going in and just writing down a task list of a few things you want to achieve this year.
Yeah. Well, see, the thing is that I think many of us, unfortunately, tend to play small in this world.
Right.
So we tend to say, well, I don't know if I could, run a marathon or travel around the world. And my job is to really challenge people about even just that way of thinking. So why couldn't you? Why not set yourself the big goal? And because, if you can think it, there must be a part of you that would love to achieve it. And that's why it's there. For me, it's a resonant piece. It's if you really want to run a half marathon, then don't settle for a 10K. Go for it and get ready for the half marathon. If you really want to, move to a new city, then do what it takes to make that happen. Or renovate your kitchen. Don't just buy a new sink. Go for it. Do what it takes to make it happen. Because the more brave we are in each of our little goals, then the more brave we are in our life. That's my thought on that.
That's great. And now again, for our audience, for a lot of folks in Thought Rock, they are inside corporations and again mm-hmm. working with inside IT departments. A question I know might be a little bit outside of the focus of today, but mm-hmm. so hopefully it's not too big of a curveball for you. But if you think about now setting goals for your team as a manager or an executive, mm-hmm. I would think that your perspective would be that the same applies in that you need to set goals that will allow people to stretch and be excited about stretching in terms of what it could mean. Mm-hmm. So any thoughts on that in terms of those internal management or corporate goals where you need to obviously have buy-in and support from your team?
Well, the first thought that came to my mind is when we set goals where we stretch, that's where learning happens, right? Learning happens outside of our comfort zone, not inside of our comfort zone. So if we, want our people to learn and grow and do new things, we need to stretch them. So that's one of the main reasons for setting those kinds of goals. How do we get buy-in is, that's the part about getting the team together and talking about, what's in it for us to achieve this, guys, as a team? What will we get out of it if we achieve this? What are some obstacles that get in the way? Is there any reason why we can't do it? And if there is, how do we work together to overcome those obstacles? So the idea of buy-in that you just talked about is critically important, because if somebody sets a huge goal for me on my behalf without my buy-in, I will likely just check out. I might just say yes and nod, quite lovely, but not necessarily participate. Whereas if I have buy-in and I have some say in it, much more likely to participate in the success of that goal.
Excellent. And the good thing about that is that's completely in line with a lot of the sessions that have led up to this session that we're more focused on, specifically on this concept of ITIL implementations inside of IT departments. And I think that message is still, again, something that resonates, is that you, when you're setting these implementation goals and targets, what keeps coming out of these sessions is, at minimum, you need to have buy-in. You need to have buy-in across the board, across the different functional areas. So, I mean, again, from what you're saying, there's no different, and people just, I think, sometimes lose sight of that. And I think it's important to understand that, is when you're setting these goals, is to think about the impact of the goal and the language of the goal and what it would mean to the individuals. And if you're expecting buy-in, you better have a good understanding of why there would be buy-in and why they would accept that goal or not accept it.
Right, and just so we're clear, buy-in is not telling them what the goal is.
Right.
Doesn't count as buy-in.
Right. Here's the goal I came up with. Does everyone buy in?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That doesn't count. So that's just telling. And, to be more realistic, maybe we can't get buy-in on every single goal, right? Maybe there are some goals that are absolutely imposed, and that is the reality. But maybe there are some other goals where you've never bothered trying to get buy-in, and you probably ought to, especially if it's particularly important. So it's critical to the success, absolutely.
Another question is just in terms of goal setting in general. I see the one example of, again, the worksheet or the document to write them down. There's some columns in there. For folks who may have tried goal setting and they've started and stopped a number of times, they just can't seem to do that, follow this document and follow this list. Do you have any tips, tricks, creative techniques for people to, again, as I say, exercise the goal setting muscle and just to get started, whether it's, the big goal on the fridge, or it's something that is the reminder from the friend every day, or, I mean, anything else you can think of that are really good creative ways for people to exercise that goal muscle?
I don't know if I have any new ones that I haven't mentioned. Sometimes these documents are really easy, but if you're not this kind of linear person, which I certainly am not, it's not that great. For me, mind mapping has been awesome because it's really visual and that's printable. I love your idea, just put it on the fridge. So sticky notes here and there. Sharing it with somebody who you know is going to hold you accountable, like they're going to keep calling you, is a really great thing. And getting a partner to help you with a goal. So if your goal, I keep coming back to the example of running a half marathon or 5K or, around the block. Doesn't matter how far you go. If your goal is to achieve something to that effect, then see if somebody else will share the same goal as you. So you can have goal as a partner. Those are all I can think of. Is there anything on the back of your mind that is a good idea?
No, I think that's good. Actually, that's a good idea, is to have a shared goal with somebody else, and you're both pushing each other towards that. I think that's a simple technique that I think has always been valuable. So I think that's great.
There's so much to be said for momentum. So as soon as you achieve one of your specifically set goals, you have momentum. You are more likely, and I don't have scientific evidence of this, except anecdotal, you are more likely to achieve your other goals. Right? So get one under your belt, and then get another one under your belt, and we're much more likely to achieve the other ones.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And any difference at all in, again, techniques, strategies, or what needs to happen from a standpoint of personal goal setting versus professional or workplace goal setting?
I believe that there's not a lot of difference. The main one that comes to mind is that personal goal setting, I really only answer to myself. Whereas if I'm setting a professional goal inside an organization where I have a boss and colleagues and teammates, then I'm accountable to those people. So that's the key difference, is to whom you're accountable. But beyond that, in terms of how to measure them and how to create them and how to set them, I'm not seeing much of a difference. And
Okay.
I would really challenge people, because I know that some people are so business-oriented that it's hard to even imagine setting personal goals. My challenge to you is give it 20% of your energy. Set 4 or 5 business goals and at least 1 personal goal.
Okay, excellent.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the other things that I've often heard, and that there's some great literature being written about, is just not to ever underestimate the power of visualizing yourself achieving the goal.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's an important, because it's a state of mind, and I think it's a pretty powerful psychological tool to always be assuming, not being afraid of the goal, not being afraid of the journey to the goal, but actually being able to visualize yourself in the state of mind where the goal has been achieved.
Absolutely. It's huge. That's what athletes use all the time, right? Elite athletes, that is how they achieve, well, it's one of the tools that they use to achieve their goals.
And people that have been successful in business, you name it, they would all say the same thing, that they were able to visualize themselves, whether it's bringing that new product to market or hitting a certain sales goal or whatever that was. You hear that consistently from folks who are successful, that's a critical component of goal setting, is actually being able to visualize it and put yourself in a frame of mind that that you are there and you've made it.
And so we know that this is a great tool, and why wouldn't we all use this tool, even for what, with the greatest of respect, we'll call just our smaller goals. Even if I don't want to be CEO of whatever, I just want to get this little goal that's kind of important to me, why wouldn't I use all the tools available to me? So if visualizing success is going to help me, then I need to be doing that.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Can you go back to, I think a few people just popped in and said that they didn't really get a chance to really look at that mind mapping slide. Can you pop back to that for a second and maybe talk a little bit, maybe a little bit more again, or just revisit that?
Sure. So mind mapping is a tool that we can use for all kinds of things. You use it as a brainstorming exercise and so on. But I've actually used mind mapping in order to help me visualize my goals. So this is a free app that I downloaded, and there's the goal is, I just put it right in the middle there, my 2012 goals, and from there, each of the pieces of my life around which I want to set goals, I then create a branch of. So my coaching business, I created a branch for that. So I have a goal of completing certification in the first quarter, for example. So that's smart, right? So that's one of my goals that relates to the coaching part of my world. Okay? So each piece is one of my different goals. And I could even go further. This mind mapping tool can take branches after branches after branches. So all the tasks could actually be listed right there visually, right on my screen.
And where did you download this from?
The App Store, the Apple App Store.
Oh, it's just the Apple App Store? Okay,
yeah,
great.
It's called, I did 2. I can't remember which one it is. I'm happy to get it back to you, though, to get you the information.
Yeah, no, that would be great, and we can always share it out there.
Yeah, I believe it might be called Mind Node, but I'm not 100% sure.
Okay. Excellent. Well, that's great, Hélène. Thank you very much again for today, and if there's no further questions, can you bring up the very last contact slide?
That one?
Great. No, one more. There you go. Excellent. So there's some contact information in there. So for those of you that want to speak directly or talk to Hélène after this session, you can either phone us or contact us, and we'll make sure you get through there. I'm sure if they Google you, will they find you?
I would hope so.
Okay. So sometimes people may want me more comfortable in dealing directly in terms of the questions that they may have. So we definitely encourage folks to reach out. Yeah. But again, we want to thank you very much for today.